welcome to the City Council Boards and Commissions Restructuring Work Session. And I'm looking to, am I just kicking it off to you, Sarah, right away, or are we going to the man? Okay, I'm sorry. Deborah, please take it away.
All right, so good afternoon, everyone. We appreciate you giving up some time. It's going to be a long day. We've got a council meeting right after the work session, but I wanted to kick this off, and Sarah will be doing the bulk of the presentation, but I just wanted to make some opening comments. You all may have recalled, I think it was the budget work session. There was a question posed. They asked, I think it was Councilmember Turner asked, do you all ever stop doing anything related to local government? And then there was a follow-up comment from Ms. Kilgore about, well, do you ever, if you don't stop doing anything, do you ever look at re-engineering, look at your processes? I said all of that because this is exactly what this is. This is an opportunity for us to look at how we structure our boards and commissions, how we support them from a staff perspective, but most importantly, how we make this relationship between council, staff, and boards and commissions and the community, I guess, more effective and impactful. And so you will see that we have not looked at this process since 2006. This is 2022. And so I think that it is timely and that we need to look at this not from the perspective of making little bitty tweaks, because I think that our issues are much bigger than tweaks. But that's not to say that everything that you're going to see is ingrained in stone. This is the beginning of a process, of a journey with the community and with council on how we truly make this a much more effective process and much more rewarding for both staff, council, and those who serve on our boards and commissions. So I will stop there and turn it over to Sarah.
Okay, thanks, Deborah. We're good here. Hello, City Council, Mayor, Vice Mayor. Super excited to be here. Okay, for the first, this presentation is broken down into 3 parts. The first part will start with a little bit of the background, how we got here and why with this initiative. And then secondly, where today's focus is going to be is on council committees and realignment. We're not asking for any kind of council decision today. We're just asking for some feedback to see if we are heading in the right direction. And then the third part will be an update on the boards and commissions restructure, stating some of our goals of this restructure and where we are and where we hope to go, as well as the community input that we've received to this point. So some background and history. Why here and why now? As you know, we've been experiencing some operational issues or challenges, and as a result, staff did conduct an internal assessment of the full structure. Some of our current boards have been around since the 60s, and we haven't ever taken a thoughtful look or an assessment at the full program as a whole. So as a result, yes, staff did create a proposal. This proposal is a holistic systems approach to reevaluate and restructure our boards and commissions workflow. Rather than addressing those individual issues, as Deborah mentioned, like kind of patchwork, we thought it was important to look at the full system, so all these 20 advisory boards, in an effort to create some consistency, but also some longevity. So how we got here today. At the council retreat in March, the council named their 6th fiscal year or 2023 fiscal year priorities. But there was also a request to look at some alignment with council committees and how we can align with boards and commissions and council committees. So that's why we're here today. And then moving forward, we do hope to do this in a more incremental path moving forward. So again, we're just asking for some council discussion today, some feedback, again, to see if we're going in the right direction. We know that this is or could be a very large change, and that we know how important it is to get it right. So this first step with council committees, we want to be very thoughtful and lay the foundation for any restructuring moving forward. So first, part 1, or actually this is part 2, council committee realignment. Again, taking a step back to look at our council committees. Today is an overview. We'll be asking for some feedback. This proposal is to align our council committees with the comprehensive plan as well as council's vision. This is an important first step to lay that foundation to align our resources as we consider changes moving forward. But it should be noted that any changes to council committees would not affect or would require any changes to boards and commissions. So this process can be looked at independently. And then towards the end, we'll go through each, what is being proposed and how they align, and then we'll ask for your feedback. All right, so just some history on our current council committees. As you know, we have 6 council committees, and the mayor appoints 3 council members to each of these committees following each election. A majority of these council committees were created in 2006 under Mayor Bellamy. You can see them listed here: Finance, Public Safety, Planning and Economic Development, and Housing Community Development. All were born out of a work session by council in 2006. Just want to note that boards and commissions, I couldn't find any kind of establishing ordinance or anything, but it is noted in previous minutes prior to 1997. So it's fair to say that's one of our first council committees. And then more recently, Finance added Human Resources to the title, and that was in 2018. So that's just a little history of where we're at right now. And here is what is being proposed. So on the left is our current structure, what we just talked through, and then what is being proposed. So what is different?
So, and just to be clear, for those that aren't familiar with the lingo, I mean, we're only talking about what I call subcommittees of council. These are only made up of council members, not the public at large.
Yes, that's a great point. So what would be different? Housing and community development, as well as planning and economic development, would look and feel mostly the same, but there would be 2 new council committees: healthy environment and safe community, and connected and equitable community, both of which this council has expressed as very high values, and we think it would be important to add that to the council committee structure. Additionally, we propose that governance would absorb the finance committee, and the reason being there that both are currently meeting as needed based on lack of agenda items at this time. So for the next couple of slides, I'm going to go.
Say that last part again, Sarah.
Both governance and finance are meeting as needed.
Do you know which absorbs which?
Oh, I'm sorry. Governance would absorbs finance.
So should we retitle it somehow, or?
That would be my suggestion. And since we're making comments in the between, I would say that governance doesn't have a lack of agenda items. We just have a lack of scheduled agendas.
Let me ask you a question. So finance right now has that, has the HR component to it. Where would that go?
Also,
Okay,
yep.
so entirely merge the 2.
Merge the 2 is a good way to say it. Public safety would be absorbed and work with healthy environment and safe community.
Additionally, I would say that while this is about the council subcommittees, we are talking about the restructure of the advisory boards being underneath these. So it will impact the future of advisory boards if we go forward with the restructure, correct?
It could, yes. So, and to this point, we're going to go through each one of these just to see how it does align with the comprehensive plan as well as council's vision. But we also want to show how the fiscal year 23 council priorities would fall into each of these. So again, connected and equitable community would be a proposed new council committee. And you can see here how it aligns with the comprehensive plan as well as the vision, and would get regular reports from staff work plans regarding resilient neighborhoods and reparations as council priorities. Did I do it? Yep. And the next one being healthy environment and safe community. Again, how it aligns, and the council priority being reimagining public safety. Governance, which we touched on, would again, so you can kind of see here how it would absorb the human resources piece as well as the finance piece. And then boards and commissions would look mostly the same. So here is where we can pause for more of that feedback. We do want to know, do these committees align in a way that captures and reflects the spirit of Living Nashville, our comprehensive plan, as well as the 2036 vision and/or other policy areas that are important? So we would love to hear your feedback, or if there's any other issues or concerns. And again, because this is such a foundational piece, we know that it's important to get this right, and so we need to hear if this is aligned with what the direction council wants to move. So I will stop there.
Will you go back to connected and equitable community, I was trying to think where these topics might currently be housed. Maybe PED somewhat, maybe governance somewhat, I'm not really sure.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think this is, one of the things that, that this attempt is trying to do is connect these up more directly with our comprehensive plan. And I think the workflow that staff does is pretty connected that way. I mean, I think, every time we get a staff report, we know, what they connected up with council priorities and comp plan. And so I think this is just trying to make that connection more clear.
Right, and you can see how the council subcommittees would be more directly related to a bunch of our appointed committees. Right now, there's not a direct connection between council subcommittees and the current appointed committees.
Yeah, and it's a good point. 'Cause
Yeah, that's why, yeah.
as the chair, as the liaison to SACE, the environmental kind of, it doesn't then go to, this is an interesting, I
Yeah,
appreciate this
there's not a
slide,
natural
because it's
place
something
for it
that's
right now.
not, there's not a council committee that discusses these things. Yeah.
And we know that is one of our priorities, so I think it's important to have a place for these discussions.
And those possible topics covered is definitely not inclusive. These were just kind of examples of things that could go in alignment with these committees.
But the idea is that every council subcommittee has some thread of connection
Absolutely.
to an appointed board
Advisement.
or commission.
So when I was presented this, a draft of this restructure in January of 2021, so some time ago, I asked for a run-through of 2 matters that happened in our community, and I gave pickleball as an example. I've seen a group come to Parks and Rec and then come to council, and where would those kinds of engagements flow through? And one of the reasons for asking for sort of a mock-up run-through of how engagement would work is that right now our boards and commissions and our subcommittees are able to handle issues from the community before they come to council for recommendations. So we have those layers of professional and lived experience. In this situation, there's more engagement opportunity. And so the subcommittees can get into like the nitty gritty details and maybe the way that the full council isn't always able to get into in our meetings. So have we had an opportunity to do some run-throughs of what a matter would look like going through these new groups? Existing, not like out of thin air, but something that's currently happening in our community and work it through the process?
Yes, internally that we've been having a lot of those discussions just to get a feel for ourselves. And then we hope, and we'll talk more about the Restructure Working Group, to also troubleshoot some of these, real life matters and walk through that with the Restructure Working Group to, again, see, feel, talk about how this could really play out. So we hope to get more examples working with the Restructure Working Group. But yes, it's also an engagement piece that we are working through to one, get a visual, but also an audio of where does an idea start and what are the options and how does it move through the system?
I also appreciate that it is tied to the comprehensive plan, and I have curiosity about the council priorities. So we're doing a lot of work restructuring based on a temporary metric. So if our council priorities change with future councils, does that mean we completely look at this and say, oh, should this be structured this way? So I do have curiosity around that part. Additionally, have we had a chance to look through all the services that the city currently provides and make sure that departments, that staff liaisons are a priority in this process? Because I don't see that yet.
I think that will fall, we'll see more of that, really an assessment of workflow and who, like, staffing, is that, am I kidding? I'm looking at you, Deborah.
No. Thank you, Sarah, for the cue. I guess maybe the first question that you asked about the council priorities. This is simply showing an example of, and we said other policies and priorities, how we can link these actual council committees up with things that you all are doing, initiatives that you all have. We also have your council vision connection. That may change in 2 or 3 years. I do not think necessarily that the committee structure has to be etched in stone. I know in Charlotte, depending upon every 4 or 5 years, we look at it to see if that structure really is in alignment with the direction that the community is taking. That's what we've got to do. We cannot just hold on to this existing structure and think that over time, it's not going to evolve and possibly need to change.
I appreciate that. I also, I think if the staff liaisons were somehow identified in this proposal, I would have a better understanding of just making sure our departments aren't getting left out. And also if someone has a concern around water or a sidewalk, that's another way for me to visualize where is this going to land and that folks don't get shut out.
I think that's important, Ms. Roney, and we will try to add that. But again, we didn't want to layer so many things on this process because I think the community already feels as though it's already baked. And so we're really trying to be as fluid and open and let this process evolve over time.
And I do think that's a good idea, Deb, because you're right. It's a lot for us to even, consume here. And the more difficult we make it for them, the more likely, we'll develop issues that may not be an issue. So I think by doing it like a step introduction and then adding on the layers eventually, once they get used to it, would be more useful for the community. Thanks.
I think Councilwoman Roney brings up a good point, and it may be one of those things that, at the retreats that, when council is identifying, priorities, et cetera, that, just right then, once it's decided, we say, okay, what council committee is going to kind of take, make sure that they're the ones, keeping control or an eye on that particular priority. It may just be one of those things that we incorporate into the process.
And to that point, it's naming a home to get these updates on progress and to really have a check-in on how we're moving forward. So if anything, it's a home for updates. So that's what's proposed. Any concerns about the actual names or how things would fall?
Are we going to get into that in the next few slides?
No, as far as council committees, this was just really high level, just seeing if you had any initial concerns with what is being proposed. And again, just council committees.
So maybe these would be the names of the committees?
Yeah, I was going to say, I guess that's the question. It seemed as if people had some questions about the name of the governance committee. Do we want to expand that to governance, finance, and HR? Or do we want to just say governance and define, when we say what the mission statement is? I don't know how people feel about this.
What are you all's feeling?
Well, so we, I would be in favor of changing the name just to make it clear in terms of its functioning. I think the way we're now reading governance is literally just that, governance. Whereas when originally created, the governance committee was more the clearinghouse for the policy, governing policy, like what was the legislative agenda going to be, not the function of government. So I think that's what it seems like I'm hearing, a desire to transition it more to that.
Yeah, I think when I've explained what the governance committee does, it's overview of policy. And that's why I have made multiple recommendations for policy for the governance committee agenda. I would suggest at that point, we could take it to policy and finance and just say explicitly what it is.
Did I hear policy and finance as a recommendation?
Probably better accurately describes what you're trying to do with it, I would assume.
And so as a next step, as part of this, first we want to see, does this make sense as far as the names? But we would define these scopes. And so you can read through if that makes sense. So that will help cement what we're talking about here and defining those. But also this could be an opportunity to update the council committee's rules of procedures, and again, to define operations and what's being heard and how things get on the agenda there. So what I'm hearing is we've got some good feedback. We'll define some scopes and come back with a recommendation.
And make some alignment with some departments. If we just had a couple of departments without saying this is the actual department that supports the committee, it would be, these departments may have alignment.
A natural, yeah.
Different committees.
Also, I guess I'm surprised that the Boards and Commissions Committee didn't have some more of that fleshed out, because I could imagine some that could be underneath that page as far as both council priorities and comp plan connections. Interwoven equity could be part of it, in which case I would imagine that, we could just look at what the current is. It doesn't need to change, or is it going to stay exactly the same? If it's going to stay exactly the same, then we should probably flesh out exactly what it does while we're doing this, so we can better communicate to the public and educate on our process.
Yeah.
Was the concept that it would change in any way?
With the Boards and Commissions Committee, no, but open to discussion.
Yeah, we're making sausage, y'all.
Okay, so I guess I'm seeing where we just lifted the words and made them, they don't really roll off the tongue exactly, but I see how you're doing that. Is that, I know cities vary greatly, whether or not they even have any subcommittees or of council at all, or they have more, or, did you all, kind of take an inventory and look around, sort of benchmark us and come up with this? Or did you kind of say, okay, here's what our system is, how can we improve it?
And maybe we're getting a little ahead of this, so, tell me if I am. But one of the, I believe the way staff approached this, and I have been involved, is kind of looking at these issues from both ways, how does council make decisions, but how do our volunteers, how do our community volunteers get their message and their recommendations up to either through committees or directly to council. And one of the thinkings about this is to more directly link our volunteer boards and commissions to these council committees, so that there are not recommendations that are made at the board and commission level that aren't heard, that aren't actually discussed formally with somebody, whether it's through, whether it's a committee or council. We really felt like there was a disconnect on accountability with those recommendations. And so one of the thinkings about changing the committees up is also to align those more directly, so that it was very clear to our volunteer boards and commissions to whom they would interact on a monthly basis, et cetera, and help them to determine what their work plan would be, and just to make sure that their work is being looked at and, answered and communicated with council members. And right now, that doesn't always happen. And so that was one of the sort of thinking about how these council committees were developed.
And I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, Sarah, that we inventoried a lot of communities, first and foremost, just trying to look at how many committees there are in alignment with council's work and advisory boards. And they range from, I think we had a new employee that said there was one advisory board to this particular community to 30 and 40. So we looked at all of those examples to try to then look at whether we are an outlier, where we are in the middle of the pack, essentially where were we in terms of boards and commissions in that alignment. And what we found is that, it's kind of what was missing was alignment and just that direct linkage is what, as Ms. Whistler just said.
And I'll add, yes, looking at other communities, but also what the comprehensive plan is and the community interaction that went into that document. So we kind of looked at it as a North Star, like the council adopted it, it had a lot of community engagement and buy-in, and it worked with a lot of boards and commissions. It is a holistic approach and a long-lasting document, so we thought it would be smart to have something that we could continue to point at and be able to evolve with, which is also similar to the vision. Yes, the priorities will continue to change, but we can see how they will fall into the comprehensive goals, and then again have kind of a home where we can place them. So again, looking back at Asheville's plans, or our comprehensive plan, and our goals for the future. And saying that one of the big goals is to create some real longevity. I think as we create each individual board, we do it for a specific, then and for that moment, but thinking big picture, how do we move forward? So yeah. Any more discussion? All right, so we'll take some of what we heard today and then come back with a final recommendation related to council committees. I do not know when that will be, but it's something for us to bake into all of the goodness. So now we are going to transition into the boards and commissions restructure. And again, this is an update. We're not asking for any votes, but we do want to hear your feedback about moving forward. Some key takeaways from this part 3. We have done some internal assessment, looking at establishing resolutions and ordinances and looking at current agendas and seeing how things lined up and how scopes have evolved over the several years. And we have found and heard often that these committees are not as effective or utilized in the way that they could be. Although some of these operational issues are not new, it's important to note, and we have noted, that we have not done this holistic assessment of the full program, to my knowledge. It is a big program. There is a lot of stakeholders, including council, staff, as well as the community. So we know it's important to get this right and to, like any program, look back, see how we're doing and how we're moving forward. We do know that some change is necessary. What exactly that looks like, we do not know right now, but we are hoping that the proposed restructure could be something to build on. Again, it is very much in a draft form, and we hope to keep building on that with the restructure working group, which we'll talk more about. Here are some...
Sarah, before you move on, one of the things that what I'm hearing back from the community is, some of these folks that are members of these boards and commissions really do feel like their particular board or commission is very effective, is very clear, isn't inconsistent, et cetera. And none of this proposed restructuring is intended to single out individuals or individual boards and commissions. And, you know, and so I guess what I keep hearing, and, or, you know, maybe people aren't saying it directly, but, you know, it's almost like they think that this idea is sort of a personal attack on an individual board or an individual. And that's not the case. I think the idea here is that structurally, it doesn't work. Some boards and commissions do work. Some individuals, some staff members, some council members work. But in the aggregate, there are some significant issues. And I think the idea, and what I hope the community comes along with, is bringing all the good parts of what's currently happening and the good work that's happening, having that continue, and leaving behind the things that are not working as well. You know, without having to go through and pick and choose and point. You know, what I hope the end result of this is that the good work continues and rises to the top, and the things that aren't working stay behind, without people getting their feelings hurt or, you know, feeling personally attacked.
And I think, Ms. Whistler, that's a really good transition into this particular slide, because I think what we have not had is the benchmark, the framework, the baseline standard of, you know, what is a good committee? How does that committee function? We don't have any benchmarks. We don't have a goalpost of how we truly want our boards and commissions to do the work of the community and work with council to accomplish that work. And so what we're trying to do is to establish that baseline. This is what we think, if restructured, the goals that we are trying to achieve in terms of success. This is what success will look like for all the committees, for all the council committees as well. So again, trying to establish that baseline of performance.
I'll also add that I'm hearing some of those same concerns, and I think I appreciate what you've offered. I think by painting a broad brush of this, it doesn't work, has excluded and caused feelings to be hurt, because we do have a lot of volunteers who are bringing their professional and lived experience, and they haven't heard the gratitude so much as the criticism. And so thank you for bringing that today.
Indeed. Yes, as Deborah said, these are some benchmarks as to what a good system could look like in the future. What do we need to be working towards? And how do we measure and put an emphasis on the outcomes of these impacts? So to have something stated and that we can start to really look back, or work towards, I should say. So those are our goals, but I will want to talk very high level about what the proposal actually is. Again, this is ever changing, so we're going to keep it high level just to talk conceptually about what is being proposed. So starting with the council committees as arms of councils, which we talked about in part 2 of this work session, created to vet policy and to make recommendations to the full council for recommendations. The council would continue to appoint advisory boards, but these advisory boards would be charged with evaluating the community input, data, and trade-offs to make more comprehensive policy recommendations to that council committee. At this level, the advisory boards would be more action-oriented and expected to vote regularly, again, to make those comprehensive recommendations. Regular reporting between the advisory board and the council committee, because this could be monthly or even bi-monthly, would provide that opportunity for the council to check in with advisory boards to hear updates on progress and initiatives, or even a request for more resources to get the work done. Additionally, these advisory boards could create and give assignments to working groups. Working groups would look similar to task forces or subcommittees we are utilizing in the current system, and would be very community-driven task forces created and dissolved with a very specific task. This would allow them to be more flexible and led by the community members. I do want to note here that this working group structure is not new. Many of our advisory boards are utilizing this structure, and we have seen how successful, and that's where a lot of the work is getting done. However, in this proposal, there would be a requirement that the advisory boards do reach out to stakeholders and invite more community members to that table to really inform people that these discussions are happening, rather than the community have to navigate how to be a part of these conversations. So us reaching out. We know that some of our most impactful initiatives and policy programs are the result of these partnerships, with other and outside community groups also doing this work. So reaching out and using our resources and partnerships to really, move forward. A great example of this is the Urban Forestry Commission and their partnership with Greenworks. They have created a tree protection task force, and this task force, as well as other Urban Forestry Commission task forces, have done a model job at really setting what this task force relationship could look like and being productive.
Before we move on.
Sarah. Let me ask this question. So the advisory board will task the work group with an assignment. Back to our original purpose for restructure, how will we guarantee as council that the work of the work group has the alignment?
Yeah, so we'd have to, and that's one of the things we hope to tackle with this restructure working group, which I'll talk more about, is establishing how do we ensure that they're truly accountable and the reporting structure, and that things do get to council committee. So it might look like a standard template for a report, but we also want to know who was at the table, who was invited to the table.
Well, I'm speaking about before the work group is decided and formed.
Oh, yeah.
Is there a conversation about the work of the work group and if it's actually going to be effective to a lasting policy or project?
Yes, I think all those discussions would have to happen at that advisory board level and really define the scope and what the task is. Be very clear about that in time, because people need to know what they're committing to.
And Sarah, wouldn't the council's committee would then ask the advisory board to do some things, and then the advisory board may say, wow, we need to really spend a lot more time on this. We'll schedule a working group that can help us bring back a recommendation to the council committee.
Exactly. There'd be more space to actually have these discussions and establish where the work needs to be put in from council committee as well as advisory boards.
So I would add, before we move on from that, the Urban Forestry Commission is a great example of this, because a working group might look like a budget working group. That doesn't meet every single month. It meets for a very specific purpose and a very specific time. They then bring their working group materials to the full board, which has staff, it has minutes, it has a staff liaison and a council liaison. So that works, and yet we're using this as an example. If the Urban Forestry Commission becomes a working group, will they have staff? Will they have minutes? I have seen working groups used here in Asheville, but not with good examples. So one of them is the Homestay Network work group that was for a very specific purpose, and the other one is the Stormwater Initiative. And the Stormwater Task Force, a lot of times we're not hearing those recommendations because it didn't have all the structure in place. So I think this might be one of the ways that folks are concerned that if the work gets pushed to a working group level and they don't have staff support, will they have publicly noticed minutes? Will they have publicly noticed meetings? Will the public be able to attend? And then what happens? Does the work just evaporate if it doesn't have those support systems in place? That seems to be kind of one bucket of where a lot of the comments that I'm hearing are coming from, is the validation of a working group. If it's ongoing work, then it's not temporary. What happens? Does it just fall into the ether?
And I think, Ms. Runner, you raised some of the details that we have got to work out, and the consistency of an advisory board, and this is what a working group does, and this is the support level of a working group. Right now it's so ad hoc, and as you just pointed out, some do, some don't, some have, some don't. So that's exactly the kind of refinement that we think is needed as it relates to restructuring these boards and commissions right now.
Yeah, and some of these questions, we would like to put to our restructure working group if they are willing to work with the city and work with staff on some of these issues. Hopefully, we can get a lot of those concerns addressed, so that so that people, the intention here is to get more people involved rather than less.
So my question is it legitimate for a working group to be publicly noticed and require all of that staff support? Is a final report of their work good enough?
So just to offer a counter thing that's happening to what we're saying right now. So right now, the Affordable Housing Committee has some kind of ad hoc task force working group, whatever you want to call it, that they're doing on their own. I think the chair and a couple members and some other members of the public have assembled what they call a build team. And it's just their own little committee. There are no staff support. There are no staff or council liaison. It's just something that members of AHAC didn't feel like they could discuss in the meeting enough. So they are meeting on their own time, sometimes at a restaurant, And so that is an example of how they're kind of already doing this, and they have a goal to come back to AHAC with some ideas. So that is, in a sense, it's like a working group, right? So I'm not sure that every working group will want that schedule, that public, that meeting, that liaison, you know what I mean? Just to give another example of what's happening currently.
But I feel some will rise to that occasion, just like if there's a work group associated with like reparations, where the community really wants to see a trail of the work and discussions. I think the advisory board or with the council committee would have to decide what level of support is needed, because I don't think it is a one size fits all.
That's a great point, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's kind of where I'm seeing too, is that if Affordable Housing Advisory Committee becomes a working group, then they're gonna, it seems, the way things, without a flow chart of how this would work, it seems like they would lose all the support. They would lose the staff liaison, they would lose the documents and the public engagement process. And so if we have Affordable Housing Advisory Committee and Multimodal and the Reparations Commission all fall out of support into working groups, that's, I think, the third layer that's missing here, or fourth, 1, 2, 3, 5, fifth layer. So I think that's where, if everything's gonna fall in a working group, that's where a lot of the frustration is lying.
Well, I think though, and we're kind of getting into the gory details, which we're hoping that this restructuring working group was going to help us with. But, if the task has been determined to be very important, that needs all that structure, then it actually will probably stay at the advisory group level. If it is something that has risen to that, then it would probably stay at the advisory board level so that it gets the most staff support.
So I think that's a really great reason to bring up what I heard in the working group conversation was, why not do a bottom-up analysis first and press pause on what we're doing here while we hear from the working group? Because even scheduling this meeting seemed like they're pushing ahead without listening to us first, and that's what always happens, right? So my suggestion is still, we're tying up a lot of staff time without a majority of council publicly supporting this while we have other strategic priorities that we do need to get done. And we could press pause and say, okay, wait, that we finally brought this into the public. We're finally getting the working group structured. Let's press pause while we wait for recommendations. Could show an effort of good faith.
Just a point of clarification, when we say working group, we're not talking about these working groups. We're talking about the working group that's working on this proposal, right?
Yeah.
Well, that we hope to work on this proposal.
Right, okay, that got really confusing for a second.
That's fair.
So why don't you talk a little bit about the status of the working group that's looking at this proposal?
Can we refer to that as the restructure working group so we can all
Clarify?
Yeah.
Yes. Okay, so, that's a great transition into.
And I'll just share too, just in support of this process. So I know I've talked with people that don't even know this is happening yet. So I don't want it to sound like it's out in the community and this is it and we're advancing on it without input. I mean, we're just starting. Yeah.
Definitely, and I hope that's one of the takeaways of today's work session is there is a bit of a pause, and we're doing this incrementally and thinking through. But yes, I want to go back to where we are and where we have been. we have conducted 2 focus groups. This consisted of our chairs and vice chairs, as well as the separate group being identified stakeholders.
Chairs and vice chairs of our boards and commissions who chose to come.
Correct, yes, thank you. And then 4 workshops, which we advertised and was open to anyone to attend. We did have 81 participants attend these 4 workshops. And then now we are currently working with the Restructure Working Group. The goal, staff did create this Restructure Working Group with the objective of soliciting help from the community members to help troubleshoot some of these things, these details that we're talking about today, and to help create guidelines and processes to help ensure that future working groups are inclusive and accountable. Recommendations from this Restructure Working Group will help to inform staff's final recommendation to council, but also these recommendations will come straight to council. We held the first meeting with the Restructure Working Group last Thursday. That was May 5th. And we had around 50 participants attend, with Aisha Adams as the facilitator. The intent of this meeting was to introduce the participants and create a shared understanding and further define the scope of the work, with the focus being on working groups. In this meeting, we did a lot of listening, and a major takeaway that we did here is that we do need to take a step back and get more input on this full structure.
While you're moving slides, I'll just say thanks to Aisha for her work keeping the meeting on task.
Definitely.
Y'all, her name is Aisha.
Aisha.
And we all do it because of spelling, but Aisha.
Aisha.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I have a question, Sarah. I just wanted to, you were talking about the work group that you met with. How many of those are members of our present commission that actually attended those meetings? Just to get an idea of.
Wait, you're talking about the first one?
The restructures, you had the 2 different groups. I was just wondering how many are presently on commissions with the board, or how many were not, idea?
Presently, I don't know. I can say the majority have served or are serving, and I don't know. I can say a majority. I feel comfortable with that, but I don't know the number.
I was just, okay, thank you.
And just to clarify, Sonia, you were talking about the 50 that attended the first meeting, or the 80? Okay.
Yeah, I was just talking about the overall. And the reason for that, I was just wondering, because a lot of these questions that they're bringing up that the people are concerned about, I was just wondering how many of those people that are concerned actually showed up at the focus groups and the meetings to actually learn the process. And that would give us an idea of how people, are actually, the ones that are concerned, maybe they are attending those restructuring, and maybe that's where some of the questions are coming from. I'm just trying to gauge,
Who was there?
Yeah.
Again, I think with also the workshops, the 4 of them with 81 participants, I'm comfortable saying that a majority have served or are serving.
Okay. Thank you.
And you said the 81 chairs and vice chairs attended, or they were just general?
The focus groups was smaller, and I don't know those numbers,
Okay.
but the 81 was for the 4 workshops.
Gotcha.
Yep. But I also want to know if our goal is to make boards and commissions more inclusive, inviting, and productive, we also need to hear from more community members than just those who have or are serving. So that would be a goal, is to hear from people, why do they know about boards and commissions, or why have they or have not? How would we get more people to the table?
Did
Okay.
you do a demographic breakdown of people who attended? 'Cause I would like to know.
We did do a survey, but not everyone filled it out, so I don't think it's complete to really report on.
All these meetings are on our website. So when you log in, you can see people, but we didn't ask them to necessarily tell us how they identify. So you could kind of look and see, but you're not, you know what I'm saying? You saw them already, didn't you? Mm-hmm.
All right, so I am backing up a little bit, more of what we have heard. So these themes actually come out of the working group. So the 81 participants to the 4, I'm so sorry, the workshops. There's, right? the workshops. We had 81 participants, and these are the major themes that we were able to pull from those facilitated conversations. Again, noting that there is a consensus that that change is needed to some degree, so hopefully we can work through what that looks like. Additionally, all the information, we use Jamboards to facilitate discussion. All of that is on the project page as well. And then lastly, here's some of the major concerns that we are hearing. Again, some of the major concerns that we have heard thus far. Notably, that the proposal was created by staff and that there is a need for more community input on the full structure. So as a result, we are taking that step back to keep listening and to work through some of these identified concerns with that restructure working group. So proposed next steps moving forward. We do hope to continue meeting with this restructure working group to develop strategies and really think through some of these details and how a possible ways forward. And then we hope to begin to think about starting a pilot. So just one tier in a way that we can really see, feel, and learn from what this could look like. We have not started planning that, but we do hope that that would be a piece of how we could unroll, again, to see and learn from. We will continue to review and adjust the proposal as we have more of these conversations. And then the end goal would be to bring a final recommendation to the City Council for consideration. I do want to note there is not a timeline. This will be a little bit of a moving target as we continue to have a lot of these conversations and these discussions. But we do hope to regularly check back with the council and make sure we're on the same page and moving forward in a way that the council sees fit. Noting that these are the council's boards and commissions.
Okay, I have a question, Sarah. I noticed that one of the concerns was it limits voices, and that's what I actually heard from the African American Heritage Commission. And so how do you have any way that, what kind of points can you give us where it's not actually limiting their voices, but it's actually going to give them a broader range? Do we have any kind of wording that we could actually give to the public to support that?
Can certainly define some more talking points, but I would say, yes, when you hear it's going from 20 boards to 4, that sounds like we're taking something away. But really thinking about what could be added, and I truly think that that's adding more people to the discussion, reaching out, asking them, letting them know these discussions are happening. In a structured way that what's happening at these boards and commissions or working groups is going to be heard. There is a venue. There is a mechanism for it to be heard by City Council as well as staff.
You're saying that, say, for instance, with the African American Commission, basically what happens is they're able to, voices to be heard on different levels and different topics as opposed to the topics that they are confined to now, as far as their missions, right? So that's what you're saying. They have a broader range as opposed to the mission that they presently have.
Well, I hope that they will somewhat be confined to what their mission is. But what we hope to happen is that advisory boards, work groups will do more outreach to actually have more broader community input into policy development. So, it could be that advisory boards or working groups go out into the community and ask for input on a particular subject matter, rather than the kind of somewhat closed types of meetings sometimes that occurs in boards and commissions now. We're not trying to say that, I think it goes back to what Ms. Whistler was talking about earlier, is we are not saying that everything about this structure is broken. We are simply saying there are opportunities for us to improve and enhance, and we're trying to do that. We are not trying to limit. We're actually trying to make this more inclusive and have broader community participation and input.
Yeah, I think that one of the big features about this proposal that I'm really excited about is this idea of bringing and I'm probably using the wrong expression for it, but to ask people, what topics are you interested in? What do you, if a particular topic comes up, what do you want to know about it? And instead of right now asking our citizens and residents and whole communities to chase around and try to figure out what committee, what board is talking about that particular issue or not talking about that particular issue, these working groups and advisory boards will be tasked with actually reaching out to the people who have indicated that they're interested in a particular topic. We're not going to wait on the community member to figure out that it's being discussed. We're actually going to be reaching out to those community members and saying, hey, do you know that this is being talked about? And here's where it's being talked about in this working group, and this is how you could get involved, rather than asking them to chase it around. And so hopefully, so that's part of, this idea we're hoping, or I'm hoping that, we'll have more participation, but also our current boards and commissions, we require them to meet at, a specified time once a month. And if they don't have a quorum, they can't vote on anything. So we have a lot of constraints around them right now that we're hoping that if with this less formal working group kind of arrangement, in addition to this reaching out to the community feature of the advisory boards and working groups, we're actually hoping that more people will feel like they can participate, and they can participate as much or as little as they want to. Whereas right now it's kind of confined based on, when the board or commission meets.
You know what,
So-
Sandra, when you mentioned the African American Heritage Commission, a thought came to my mind. I used to serve on that commission, and when Deborah mentioned it could potentially be the opportunity for people to get out into the community, immediately I thought about an example would be street naming. And one thing, because we were talking about that when I was on there then, and it occurred to me that, and you tell me if this would be what you envision, Deborah, it would be an opportunity for folks on the African American Commission to go into neighborhoods without everyone having to be there in order to make quorum, having folks in the community go into other neighborhoods in the community to seek one-on-one communication. And it might end up, oddly enough, putting down a barrier. Because I heard from a lot of people when we were going through the reparations process and people had to come to the, that a lot of people, once Eddington was open, felt more comfortable going there. So it might very well provide greater opportunity to let your voice be heard to people who look like you and understand whatever issue is on your mind. Is that something that you had in mind, or that kind of process?
Exactly.
I know I was involved in the Affordable Housing Committee for a number of years, 5, 6, something, and it was feedback we heard a lot, that people couldn't make that meeting, it was too formal, it was in the middle of the day, they had kids, there were all these things, and I think the opportunity for some of them to get together at their time and their convenience to discuss issues and then still have an opportunity to bring that to a council committee and so on could be priceless. That was something that we heard a lot, just the regimented meetings.
So I have a question. So the working group will come from the advisory, or can people add experts to the working group? Okay, so to drive it home for the African American Heritage Commission, it seems to me that they've struggled to get projects off the ground, but they can call on community members to come in and be that support, to be project specific. They don't have to make the time commitment. They can just get the job done and carry on and go do something they would rather do. So I think it gives us a broader reach, and people don't have to make the time commitment of serving on an advisory board.
Can I ask a question about that?
They can pick the narrow issue that they may be interested in. They may not be interested in the broad, they don't want to sit on city council and hear about every little thing, but they're interested in one particular small item this way, it gives them an opportunity to plug into that for as long or as little as they want to. And then, but again, there's accountability that the working groups, the task that was assigned to the working groups, you know, it has to be done or reported on, et cetera. So the work, hopefully structurally, cannot get lost. And that's one of the things that we continue to hear is people feel like, you know, they've done X, Y, Z, and then it just poof goes away. And
Their time is in vain.
exactly, or being ignored. And, you know, we're hoping, and again, with this restructure working group to, you know, come up with what those mechanisms and tools are to make sure that this work doesn't get lost like sometimes community work does right now.
Okay, so in other words, like say, for instance, if you had the African American group as a working group and they actually sort of elevated it up to the next level, to the advisory board, then they would have the resources to actually implement what they were trying to do by taking it to another level. So it makes sense because that way you're not, okay, great. I was just trying to actually get some points there because I know they come to me a lot and, you know, concerned about that, but that makes a lot of sense now because you have structures in place that will allow you to get things done from here when people come into the group, and if it makes sense, it goes to the higher level and get implemented and, okay, process. Great,
So I
thanks.
have a question about this. What's preventing our boards and commissions from inviting presentations from public that don't have to serve on the committee right now? I have seen it happen at multimodal, where an advisory, like advocacy group is on the agenda to present. And they don't have to be on the commission, and they're not staff, but they present for consideration. I have seen it also go in the other direction. I've seen groups ask to be on an agenda and be declined. So I'm curious, I've seen what we're saying would happen work, and I've seen it be excluded.
And that's a good point because you're right. I know even with the commission, we've had groups that we bring in all the time to talk to us on different issues. So that is, but you're saying the issue would be if you have groups like that decline people from coming in or prevent people from coming in. Is that what you're concerned about?
Well, right now, if someone, this is why I've asked for like a mock-up, because if we have an issue around like a street naming, and then how does it get on an agenda? Like how does the community have an expectation that it will land on agenda eventually, even if the queue for agenda is really long, that maybe that's essentially what we're doing. If we create a funnel that's where there's going to be really long list of agenda items, then if you're 48th on the list, then that is effectively a no, instead of having a place to go to right now.
But I think the kind of the alignment issue may be why some are doing it, some aren't doing it, some are accepting other folks come in and others aren't. The example that we got from Ms. Mosley, it was about an assignment actually to that committee to look at renaming streets. And they could, that committee could have done whatever it is that they wanted to do in order to address that.
But what's preventing that from happening now?
Nothing. But what we hope, though, is that there will be continuity, guardrails, and that we will say to those groups, you can do this. And these generally are some of the parameters or the guardrails for how that can be done effectively and productively, so that we don't end up with, as you say, long lists of agendas that have no alignment and may not be able to be addressed in a timely manner.
Well, I'll tell you what prevented that when I was on, timing and people's schedules. And
In meeting time?
or enough people getting together at the same time, including staff to be there. That's what prevented it.
Yep.
And I'll add.
Well, and I'm sorry. You know, these just like city council does, just like council committees do, advisory boards, sorry, I'm trying to use the right words. Advisory boards will have what their priorities are in a given year, hopefully aligned with council's priorities. Some things, if they choose not to act on them, it's not that they're bad ideas, it's just, they've identified, just like we do, they've identified 10 priorities, and that just is the 11th or 13th or whatever. It's the nature of, it's the nature of any group or any organization that you have to prioritize or you don't get anything done, and you've got limited resources, whether it's limited in staff time or limited in dollar time. We expect we as a council to come up with priorities. We expect staff to come up with priorities. We will expect advisory boards to come up with priorities. And hopefully the interaction between the council committees and the advisory boards will eliminate advisory boards kind of going down the path that's not aligned with city council, and then being disappointed when their work isn't or recommendations aren't adopted. So again, trying to be responsive to the criticism that, sometimes these recommendations are not acted upon. Partly it's, one of the things that have been identified is some of these groups are working on priorities that are not council's priorities. And, it's not that they're bad ideas, they're great ideas, but there's only so many hours in the day and so many dollars in the bank. I feel like if I were in the community working on something, I would want to know, is this something council's would even consider acting upon? And if they wouldn't, then, I'd have to figure out another way to get it done, or, do my politicking of deciding, trying to convince council members. But I'd rather know before I start investing a bunch of time in something than afterward.
So would you say it would be a good idea, because I think that may be an issue that a lot of people are concerned with, is like you said, some of the things that they may find that they need in the community does not align with the priorities of the advisory or the council. And I think those are the people that may be concerned. So maybe we need to have a process for those people to basically be able to present those ideas, okay, where we can actually look at it. Maybe it can get up to the advisory board and council level, where then we could look at it and say, you know what, that's a great idea, rather than dismiss it because it does not fall into a category.
Yeah.
That might be the work of boards and commissions, because if we're cutting
Exactly.
it down under a pilot, then our workload is gonna be super light. Like, we wouldn't have that many appointments. So maybe when community members have a proposal, they don't know exactly where it lives, maybe it can come through boards and commission, and then we send it out to the.
Absolutely. And that is the purpose for this whole work session, just to get you all's ideas, but also for the Restructure Working Group to work through all of these details. Because yes, there are lots of good things that are happening with boards and commissions, but there's just such a huge need for us to restructure so that they become more impactful and more in alignment, and that there is a process for people who don't know how to get and make their way through our bureaucracy.
Well, and I think the other thing is, boards and commissions is one way to
Right.
get things done. I mean, we all know that we get a lot of community input
Tonight.
through other ways than boards and commissions. Boards and commissions are very, very important, but it is not the only way to get to city council, nor the only way it is to get to staff. So, I guess I just, want to
just name that, because I don't know about maybe other city council members don't feel this way, but I feel like I get a lot of input that doesn't come through boards and commissions.
True. Just a couple things I wanted to share. So I was thinking of ways that these working groups could solve problems we've had. And I'm remembering when COVID first occurred, we rushed out, some of us, I was on the downtown commission and stuff, and some of us rushed out into the streets of downtown, like how are restaurants going to survive? They need to sit outside, we need outdoor spaces and so on. And we had this moment of frustration for a couple weeks where the multimodal commission and the downtown commission and its parking committee were all trying to meet, but there were too many of us and it wasn't a public meeting and we couldn't talk about anything. We had to stand in different, it was just so bizarre. And all we wanted to do was get together and say, hey, on the fly, we're going to have to come up with some kind of solution. And the working groups would have been able to do that. So that was interesting. I was just realizing that sitting here. And then totally non sequitur, a different issue. So I worked really closely.
Let's not have another pandemic.
No, let's not have
Okay.
another pandemic.
Just to test
But
this,
just
all
to
right?
say, yeah. So another board that and this is, I know we all represent different boards and sit, and have spent a lot of time with different boards. So I'm just going to speak to the ones I spent some time with. The Downtown Commission comes to mind. So in this council committees and working groups and advisory boards, I don't see where downtown lands. And I wonder if that's something the restructuring working group could kind of analyze for us, because what I'm seeing and what I'm concerned about is our downtown is the economic hub for 5 counties, right? We are the downtown of Western North Carolina. Right now, we don't have any staff dedicated to downtown. We don't have a budget dedicated downtown. If we lose its only advisory board, and like what's left? How does downtown Asheville get cared for, watched for, and so on? And I think what would help me is if the restructuring working group could kind of go through the boards and committees that exist and say, does this one get lost somewhere, or where is this one gonna land now? And maybe that's the planning council committee or so on.
And Sage, one of the things that I have been trying to think about and thinking about it this way, and hopefully the restructure working group will think about this, rather than where will a particular board and commission land, what I'd like us to be thinking about is where will the work land? What's the work that needs to be done, and where should that land? Not the board and commission. And I think that if we think about it that way, I think it's going to be easier for us to, sort of start to,
Maybe so.
Two
And yeah,
maybe
determine
different
that.
buckets.
And yeah, and
And
just to be
then
clear,
another-
my concern is that just, something as large as downtown Asheville could get lost in the shuffle of management, advisory, you know what I mean? And I know that's not our goal here, so I'm not saying or implying that's gonna happen. I'm just wondering how we can include that in the restructuring group and how they can.
Well, so I think initially when this was being brainstormed, they sort of did try to take every committee and commission and sort of figure out what it would fall under effectively, because I think you're right in the sense that people want to know, well, wait, how is this committee or commission going to be covered now? But I hear what you're saying, Gwen, and I, are you saying maybe this is an opportunity to decide whether or not all these boards and commissions fall under our initiatives as a council?
Well, and many of them do. I just haven't
Well, no,
found.
I'm just saying, I'm trying to just clarify the.
Yeah, I think that,
Planning and economic development.
yeah, more than likely, that's where that work would go. I mean, that would be but again, I mean, for me, I hope that the community's not thinking about this like, okay, I'm gonna take the boards and commissions that's currently right here and I'm gonna plug it right here. I mean, that would really not get to the goals we're trying to get to. We want more inclusivity. We want more accountability. We want more effectiveness. And so if all we're gonna do is just replug everything in, then we've really kind of missed the boat. And so I want us to think about what's the important work that's being done and where should that go? And then, and another big, sort of overreaching question is some of our boards and commissions that have been set up as advisory boards actually do work that's mandated by, mandated legally. however they got there. So for example, the design review.
This is, yeah, I
So
haven't
that-
really finished my question,
I
but that's where
mean-
I was going with the downtown. Like, we have the design review and planning and zoning, and I don't mean to interrupt you, I just wasn't able to even complete my thought. So what happens to some of these, like downtown, I don't want to say that downtown is different than like another board or committee. I just happen to have worked with that one a lot, and I know that I'm not seeing a clear landing, like planning and economic development may be, but downtown's a big thing. So the other part is that my follow-up question was, and Gwen was starting to talk about it, is the planning and zoning, the design review. These are like regulatory required boards. Do they go away?
No.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
so-
we're only talking about advisory, council-created advisory committees.
Maybe we needed to tweak this presentation for
Verify.
posting to make that clear. That, and, because what we didn't see in this presentation was the big overview of how many boards and commissions there really are. So we have many that are statutorily required, planning and zoning, board of adjustment. This doesn't touch that. Also, we have many that we appoint to, but we do not, a staff. So ABC, Airport Commission, Metropolitan Sewage District Board, all of those, TDA, all of those we'd continue to appoint to as required. They're not, this is only those boards and commissions that over the years have been created by the council. And, now we're sitting here, and how many total are there?
20 advisory boards.
And
Inclu-
7
including-
state
and-
mandated at least.
Yeah,
minimum.
I think Esther's right. That slide would be very helpful in
It's
this.
it's
overall
20
picture.
advisory,
We're up to like 43 all
Total,
around.
when
Right,
you talk
but
about
again,
quasi-judicial
yeah.
and, yeah.
And to Sage's point, that's one of the reasons why I asked where, if we could look at this list of staff liaisons, we might be able to identify the work. Because I don't see where transit lands or greenways land, or, like, I see neighborhoods listed in there explicitly, but that would be really easy to check off the list if we had the list of staff liaisons. What is the work being done in the boards and commissions as sort of an inventory of that work?
I'm seeing some puzzled looks. You don't literally mean like Joe Schmo staff person. You mean like which department would support that?
No. I mean, we currently have staff liaisons right now. For example,
You
we
want
have a
the
staff
names of the
liaison.
individuals?
If we had a list of the staff liaisons, that would help us to identify the work currently being done by our advisory boards, and then whether or not the work would be linked up to the way that we're currently structuring this process.
Well, or, I mean,
So the staff
yeah, okay, I
liaison to
heard you. I
multimodal,
mean, at
the
the
work.
very least, considering staff's obviously fluid, I mean, we would want to know I think the department and the position.
Well, and I'll add, one of the ideas behind restructuring would be able to better support these committees with a cross-departmental amount of staff in those advisory board meetings. So it doesn't just have to be transportation, it could be transportation and planning and urban design, because there is a connection. And we're often seeing that our transportation staff liaisons are going to make presentations often over here, but if we were having those conversations and both staff departments were able to be in the room, we could accomplish a lot in that meeting.
It's true, because in housing, we often talked about the importance of transit, but no one was ever there to talk about transit, and yeah.
And then you're waiting
The
for the.
interconnectedness, yeah.
We've given you a lot of feedback here.
Appreciate
But can you tell us next steps?
Well, before we do that, I have to name that Durham has a stipend program for the council, their council-appointed boards, committees, commissions, and task force members. The stated reasons are that equitable compensation will be available for members who are experiencing financial hardship and require support in their volunteerism. They name childcare, parking, transportation, and meals as reasons, and they have 24 advisory boards that are eligible for these equity stipends. So I would just suggest that while we're talking about how many boards and commissions we have for a population of our size, and what we could do to increase participation, I think it should be on the table.
Definitely, and that's something for the council can certainly consider. We know that especially with this proposed structure, it will be a lot of work for advisory boards.
The mayor wanted you to do next steps. What do we?
Yes, so proposed next steps. We hope to keep working with the working group to talk about a lot of these details. Just today, we hear that it's going to be evolving some. It's going to keep evolving, and we hope to keep checking in with you like this. So we'll keep incorporating that input. We do hope to begin work on establishing a pilot. We have not begun that planning process, but we do think that would be an important piece of seeing how this could work. And then the final, last step would be making a final recommendation to the council. There is not a timeline. Again, this is going to be a little bit of a moving target as we continue to hear more and learn more.
No. I'm just curious in all this ongoing feedback so far, have we heard from any group to say, hey, we don't think it should be 6, it should be 10? Have we had any kind of, I haven't been able to find it. When I looked at the project page, I couldn't even find it. So
I don't
I'm just
know
wondering
that-
if anybody.
And
Well-
I'm gonna just answer. Sage, we haven't, unfortunately, with the community, actually been able to get to that level.
Okay.
I mean, if you've,
I just am getting emails like, this is bad, but I'm not getting emails that say,
Right.
what if you did this instead?
and that's where we'd
Yeah.
really like the, restructuring working group
Great.
to get to.
Yeah, and I hope they hear that today, because I know I've been thinking like, well, they're gonna send other ideas, right?
Yeah, I mean, we're hoping to get beyond where we are right now.
Yeah.
It's been a little, interesting, the community feedback, and, what I'm hoping is that, the community will open-mindedly look at the proposal and tell us what needs to change from that proposal, and not, we like it the way it is, we like it the way it is, nothing should change. Because I think, I believe, and I would love to hear Deborah's point on this, but I believe that that it's not sustainable the way it is right now, that we do not have the staffing resources to operate boards and commissions the way it is right now. We would really love to have the community help us to solve that problem, but not lose all the good stuff that we are getting out of our boards and commissions right now. And so we want people to stay engaged, open-minded, and creative, rather than, sort of telling us how bad this is, but without suggestions as to how to improve it.
Yeah, and I'll share. I mean, I've been on boards and committees for a long time before I joined council, and I didn't hear anybody think that it was a perfect process. I mean, I'm pretty sure everybody that I worked with knew it needed to be adjusted, changed, and updated in some way to be more productive and efficient, so.
And I think we are hearing that as far as consensus. There is room for improvement. So what does that look like?
Okay, so, what?
I would like Deborah to respond to what
Oh, do you had a,
I think Ms. Whistler wanted me to respond to is this sustainable, the way that the current structure is now? And I can say, and I said this in my earlier comments, a resounding no. This cannot continue. But it's not just about staff resources. It truly is about, are we doing the best work for this community? And I don't think with this current structure that we are. All we are saying is, let's take a step back. Since 2006 to 2022, not a thing has changed. And we are saying it's time for us to relook at something that we think is very important for our community. Under the current structure, it is not working, it is not sustainable, and it's not effective, and it's not impactful. And that's our goal.
And on the human capital side of things, today we'll hear, or later on today, we'll hear appointments for boards and commissions. All of those vacancies came about due to resignation. And we've been seeing resignation coming left and right. The volume is very high. So we can't deny that even on the volunteer side of things, we want to make the best use of folks' time, but for whatever reason, they're not sticking and staying.
That's a great point.
okay, so, great work. I know it's a difficult topic. I've seen early iterations of presentations, so you guys have, I know you've done a lot of work and come a long way. And, when I I'm very glad we're doing a pilot. We're doing a go slow approach. We're experimenting. We're getting feedback from the community and the participants. And so I think that's hopefully reassuring to anyone who has any concerns or doubts about it, that we're not, jumping into the deep end. We're wading in very slowly. So look for more about that. Anybody else have anything before, we've got council at 5, so we'll probably need a little break, but anyone else have any other comments? Okay, great, thank you.